main campus in Athi River. The event will be aired live on NTV. Daystar University, Excellence, Transformation and Servant Leadership.
The County Government of Kilifi, with approval of His Excellency the Governor Honorable Amason Jeffa Kingi, has granted 100% waiver on all interest and penalty accrued on all outstanding land rates. Property owners in Kilifi County are advised to take advantage of the waiver period that starts from the 1st of June 2019 and ends on the 30th of June 2019 on condition that the principal rates are paid in full. Property owners are advised to obtain invoices from the Sub-County Revenue Office where the property is located and make payment by depositing cash or banker's check to our bank account. Take notice that once the waiver period lapses, the county government will institute all necessary measures to recover any unpaid rates and penalties, including repossessing the property. Tulipe ushuru, tujenge Kilifi.
Jumia Anniversary Sale is live now. Get the Y9 Prime 2019 24,999 and Pampers Jumbo Pack at 999 shillings only. Sherekia nasi till the 14th of July. Jumia, the online shop you can trust.
Imagine kuna Everton akicheza ball Kenya na 102. Regular tickets will be available from 1st of July. Tukutane Kasarani. SportPesa, make it count.
Welcome back. You're watching the Leadership Forum here on AM Live. And the subject that we're using this morning is leadership in Kenyan universities. We have heard from our guests. Some of them, of course, were pending. And of course, we have right now Martin Olong on the lectern, who is an advocate of the High Court. And he's going to give us also his peace of mind about the leadership in Kenyan universities. Martin, you've got 5 minutes beginning now.
Thank you, Debarl. First of all, I think on this panel we are agreed that the role of a university is threefold: research, teaching, and community outreach. And if that is what we are agreed upon, then there's also something that we seem to be alluding to. That then leadership in the universities ought to be a wholesome leadership. It's not about academic leadership only. It's about general leadership. And so what we are really asking and talking about is that what is lacking in the university is that aspect of leadership. So yes, there's academics, there's teaching, but we are not having the leadership that is able to take a university to the marketplace to make it relevant and so on. Why is it that today when we look at our public, we can talk about Oxford University Press, we can talk about Harvard Business Review. These are traditions that have come out of time by these universities making sure that they are relevant beyond the academic walls. So what we are talking about in our universities today is that we are lacking in offering leadership that is taking us to the marketplace and taking us to the place of excellence. And when I talk about that is that I also want to put it in context. We have said, or we've heard it being said, that we must merge our universities, we must begin to rationalize universities. Why are we saying so? One is because we've seen a crisis in terms of financial, in terms of matching their balance sheets. There are issues that have to do with management and leadership. That you're having universities which are not remitting statutory deductions, which are not paying taxes, which are not compliant, which are essentially technically insolvent. And what this is telling us is that there's a leadership deeply lacking there that should take this to the marketplace. And for me, if you asked me, it's time we looked at how we appoint vice chancellors of public universities at any university. Because the role of a vice chancellor is not a teaching role. It's actually a business leadership role. So we need people who actually know business, people who understand how businesses work. To take a university to that level, you require not academic leadership, you need business leadership. And that's what is going to take us there. And that said, I think that Chinua Achebe was right. The problem with Africa, and he talked about Nigeria, was leadership and willingness to take responsibility for personal leadership. What do we see whenever we talk about universities? Vice chancellors fighting to be reappointed. For what? If you've done a good job, why would you be fighting to be reappointed? it follows that the job should be able to just come because people are saying, hey, you've done so well, we want to give you another. But what does it mean to do so well? Again, that is the other thing that we need to look at. Doing so well is not manufacturing students. It's leading, making the university go to the place that you want to be. And then we have also engaged in duplication. We are building in new universities, we are chartering new universities next to each other. And what are they doing? I want to give you an example of Moi University and Eldoret University. Each of them is teaching engineering. Each of them is putting up a faculty of engineering. Now, at some point, they were sharing teachers and they were sharing the facilities. And at some point, the transcripts from University of Eldoret were actually coming from Moi University. I mean, that is unnecessary. So when we talk about trying to rationalize, basically what you're saying is that if you have a regional university, say you're looking at Western, then the rest of those others are actually colleges, they are actually campuses, they are actually branches, and they are specializing. There were times when we knew KU University for education. I don't know what we know it now for. Maybe for buildings, maybe for malls. And I'm not sure how relevant that is in terms of education. There were times when we knew University of Nairobi for engineering, for law, for medicine. You would want to ask, is that still the situation today? So I want to come to the place where Albert Bandura, who writes about leadership, talks about self-efficaciousness, self-efficacy. We need to have a mastery of our experiences, and these experiences ought to take us to the next level. I mean, we should be learning from where we come. Where is our past? What has worked well? Where have universities come from? Right now, we are looking at what Rwanda has done around universities. We are looking at what South Africa has done around universities. We're looking at what the US has done around universities. Making universities relevant, making universities sustainable, giving it leadership that it deserves. So I am for the place where we must relook at universities. We must look at what kind of leadership we are providing, change the law if necessary, make university a place for business development, yes, for learning, yes, for research, yes, but the leadership of university does not necessarily have to reflect the academic side of it. It must reflect somebody who offers leadership, somebody who knows what the market wants, and somebody who can take these universities to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin, a law advocate of the High Court, also a lecturer at the Kenya School of Law. We thank you for your sentiments as well. So do you have the mastery of experience if you are the Vice Chancellor? And appointing of a Vice Chancellor, does it really have to be an issue of life and death? If you have been doing a sterling job, why then should you be pushing the envelope, of course, for you to be reappointed? That is another probing question that, of course, Martin is bringing to bear as well. Lastly, we want to hear from Professor Rachel Gesami, and she's also heading to the lectern right now. She holds a PhD in economics, and she's a director quality assurance and a professor in School of Business at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. Rachel, you got 5 minutes beginning now.
Thank you, Debarl. And good morning, Kenyans and students and lecturers and all universities. Now, today we have all agreed that universities should fundamentally be devoted to excellence in teaching, learning, research, and developing readers in all disciplines. But when we agree up to that level, there is no contradiction. But when you step back and look at our curriculum, we want to talk about that. We want a live debate on curriculum development for this country universities. We want to be able to move education from the university pace to a level where students come out of high school and go to do technical training. I'll give you an example. In America, students are encouraged to go to mid-level training where they train to be technical people at the industry level where, for example, you need to build a house, you need a plumber. In Kenya, we call them plumbers. In America, they call them environmental engineers. They train them from high school and give them a mid-level certificate, and they are technical in that area. Here in Kenya, we are trying to all go to the university. Everybody is going to university. So we need to think about that. Should we be thinking actually of getting our high school students to be taught at a curriculum at that level that takes them to technical areas instead of all crammering to go to university and get a general degree, or a degree that has the industry specific at that university level. We can also have certificate level or a diploma level, or people who are functional at that level and can do a lot for this country. The other issue I want to look at is I want the debate that is currently ongoing with regard to the university mergers. What do we mean? We need to start thinking. And when we are talking about leadership at the universities, are we talking at the university leadership, or do we want to look at the leadership of education in this country? Now, when you go back to the sessional paper of 1967, we were supposed to have reached a level of education that is standard to the entire world. I'm saying, yes, we have attained education, but we could do better. We could do better in terms of managing education at the government level. And what do I mean here? How much do we budget for our universities, for those who go for public? We need to think about that. I believe that the lecturers and the vice chancellors in the universities are doing their best given the economic status that we have. We need to focus them, as one of our colleagues, Collins, was saying. Yes, it's important for us to have synergy of purpose in terms of making sure that every level is doing the work that they are getting the best out of. So I would like to indicate that also when you look at the curriculum, and I want to go back to that because it's a very important aspect, we need to be clear that we look at the discipline. We encourage our students to think out of the box. We need to kind of strengthen the education sector, and especially the technical training that we are giving. We need to come up with rigorous research, and Kenya is seriously, Kenya, we are not doing research. Our research level is very low. We are not attracting enough resources for research in this country. The proposals end somewhere. The universities, like my own university, I want to encourage that we need to do rigorous research that can be translated into policy briefs. We are supposed to be fair at the policy level in terms of research and the contribution that we will make from that rigorous research. We should be able to translate it into policy briefs that guide the education sector, for example, the health sector, for example, or the sectors. So as the universities, we should be leaders in making sure that what we disseminate helps this country more than just waiting to do research that helps the students to graduate. And we need to go a notch higher in terms of doing the research. The mergers I've talked about, the leadership in terms of at the university level, that's one aspect that we need to look at deeply, but we need to step back and look at the leadership we are getting at for example, Ministry of Education, the regulators, for example, the university, the council for, the Q. We need to know what direction are the universities being given, so that there is this confusion. You have had the confusion of, oh, is it this curriculum we are going to implement, or have we trained our teachers to be able to take this new curriculum? So I'll stop there, and we will carry on the debate on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And of course, she also brings out the issue of curriculum development. Right now, the country is trying to overhaul the entire curriculum of the lower, upper, and of course, secondary school curriculum. But is it also in tandem with what is happening in the universities? If you're making changes in one place, should we also be looking at all the moving parts as far as the entire ecosystem of the academia is concerned? And this is what we also want to throw to our panelists this morning to talk about the budget right now. Is it a big an issue? Should we also find this to be the prime solution in trying to come up with very effective university management as far as resources is concerned as well? Right, we just want to buckle down to discussion, and we'll pick up from where Professor Dominic Mwenja actually began, about the economic citizenship of people who leave the universities, and what you were talking about, the massification of the education in our universities in the country as well. So we have the massification and the economic citizenship which is not really trying to, or they're not really interfacing, or they're not really in tandem. Maybe you can also maybe highlight on that more briefly to give us just an understanding of what we were talking about this morning.
Yes, Debarl, if you look at our universities, I'll give you a couple of examples. Egerton University, when it was being started, that was the agricultural university for this country.
Yes.
JQuat was supposed to be an engineering and technology university. University of Nairobi, we had the law school. I went to Kenyatta University when it was a constituent college of the University of Nairobi for education. Now, but those universities have walked away from the core of why they were founded in the first place. If you look at JQuat, Kenyatta, and University of Nairobi, just to give an example, those are our 3 largest public universities, but they're also the 3 largest private universities. And that is a problem. There's a disconnect between that and the other. Now, they're competing with the private universities that should be filling in the gap that the other universities have left in the creation of knowledge in this country, in different sectors of the economy. And therefore, there is a disconnect between what we are producing, because we are going for numbers instead of quality. We are measured by the number of students. How many students you have? 70,000, 60,000, 50,000. And that measures the success of a university. It should not be the case. It should be the quality of the graduates that we are producing and what role they're playing in the development of this country. When you look at Egerton today, anything to do with agriculture, we should also be looking at Egerton University, where you're a graduate of Egerton. JQuat, we should be driving most of our innovative ideas in technology and all. When we walk away from that core of why some of these universities were found in the first place, then we start to dilute the role they play in our society.
But are they really pushed to actually working out from the core, or is it the circumstance around the ecosystem itself that is driving them? Because we can actually pick out also the PhDs that the 118 of them. Where were they emanating from? Is it maybe from the Faculty of Engineering? And no, actually it was
most
business.
of them in business.
Yeah, most of them were from business.
Yes.
But this is what the market actually is reading, that they are seeing there's more need for people who are applying for, you know, for business sort of courses other than engineering and technology for that matter.
And that's where leadership is needed, because this is an ecosystem. We talk about STEM. If you look at the graduates who are in our STEM programs in the university, they're minority. They're probably 25 to 30%. Now, the rest of it, they're in business. There are these other courses that they will end up being out on the street with a degree, not employed or underemployed. Now, that is not serving the society. And that's why we have to look at the entire, from early childhood education all the way to the university education as an ecosystem. If we fail to do that, and we have the silo thinking that we've had for many years, that we concentrate on this 11%, and out of that 11% that are going to the university, 75% of them are not in STEM, and STEM is the one that actually drives innovation and technology in any country that you go to, then we are missing the mark.
Debarl, I wanted to revisit something that Professor said. Basically, why we've lost it is that we have actually lost also on academic honesty.
Academic honesty.
And you see, when a university that is specializing in agriculture and technology produces more PhDs in other non-core areas, there's a problem. There's a university that was chartered, and less than 3 years into its charter, it was offering PhDs. I'm talking about Kisii University. And the question then you ask is, what is the level of academic honesty? But more importantly, we've also lost it. When did you ever hear that if you want to go to Oxford, you can find Oxford in Kenya, in Nairobi? You want to go to Oxford University, you go to Oxford. Oxford does not go to London. So why would Kisii University be in Nairobi? Why would Egerton University be in Nairobi? Because there's a University of Nairobi. That's why we created that's the logic. So that when you go to Embu, you should find University of Embu there. But why would the University of Embu come to Nairobi? There's a problem. There's a leadership failure here, because what we are now doing is making our presence totally irrelevant in terms of what our specialization is and what our core business is.
David.
Well, thank you, Debarl. But there is an elephant in the room. And I totally agree that things could be better regarding university leadership. But there is something that the vice chancellors face, and very few people address that issue. And this is the issue of funding of universities. You are vice chancellor and you are expected to deliver. You are expected to deliver on research, you are expected to deliver on teaching, you are expected to deliver on community service. But how are you facilitated to do this? I think in this country we need to seriously think about every university and its funding model. And we need to come up with funding models that sustain our institutions. Now, allow me, Debarl, to be the devil's advocate here, because I think when we talk about things that are really wrong in our universities, and it's true that there are things that are wrong, we forget that there are also things that are really right. And if you build on those things that are right, we could solve this problem. For example, we do have a regulator. We have CUE as a regulator. And if you look at CUE as a regulator, they clearly guide you on, for example, when you're hiring faculty, how many teaching faculty you should have and administrative faculty you would have. And the idea is to make sure that teaching and research and service is actually supported.
Yes.
So that you focus on your core business. But then, how do you fund this? Now, for public universities, perhaps this is an easier question. I know they are also struggling financially, but at least they have government backing. You know, they say this is how much we need. Now, you move to the private universities, and it's a very different thing. Okay, the question is, this is what you need. Go make it. So we need a funding model. And so we may talk about problems of leadership. Yes, I agree that there may be some aspects of that, but I think as a country we need to flesh out this issue of how do we fund university education, much like we have made a lot of progress in terms of universal health. I think in this country, in terms of the Big Four agenda, the issue of universal health is really taking root. And we have done a good work. And we began by looking at the state of our hospitals, which was pathetic. Now you look today on the issue of, affordability of health. Yes, we still have a long way to go. But to a large extent, we have answered that question and we are moving in the right direction. Can we now look at education?
Thank you.
And think about how we can fund quality education? But let me finish with the other thing that is right for us.
No, let's just maybe try and hover around the funding bit a bit. We'll come up to the other question that you have as well.
Okay.
But I think that is a tripping wire, where we are so dependent on the funding, especially public university, from government, and I don't know how also the public university or the private university survive. Maybe your model is working. That's, we have these people who are dependent on government so much that you're not able to think outside the box. We have universities outside outside this country. I don't know if it's Stanford University, which also, funds the government. Actually, it's the other way. They have come up with very innovative ways, with ingenuity and intellectual properties. It's earning them money until they have enough resources to back their researches and even fund the government, Collins. Are we so dependent on that we are not able, that we are sort of crippled in our thinking on how we can be resourceful in terms of even just funding our own research?
Yes and no, Debarl. The yes is, I think, to an extent, not just universities, but public bodies have grown up in this country with the dependency syndrome. I will get from government, my duty is to spend. And that's been a malaise for a long period of time. That's the yes. The no side is, if you look at the universities in the West that do not rely on government, we must ask ourselves, where do they get that money from? And they get that money from society. And we have two problems in our society currently. Problem number one that we've discussed on this show, we have a financial problem. And if we have a financial problem in society, you do not expect that there will be money available in the market that will be given to university. That's issue number one. Issue number two is our appreciation of research. The market does not appreciate research. And since they don't appreciate research, they will not put their money in that research enterprise. They want research products, but they don't want to put their money in it because they can't hold it. And unless we deal with that, we'll be in a huge problem. Take STEM, for example. The reason why JKUAT will go to STEM is because STEM is cheaper. Why they will go to the business course? The business course is cheaper. You don't need any lab to train somebody in business. You need a lab to train them in engineering, and the lab is costly. So it's much easier to get a BCom graduate as opposed to getting a graduate engineering. The third thing is you then hear conversation that, but how did one lecturer supervise more than 3 PhDs? Yes, Q says no lecturer should supervise more than 3 PhDs at any given point in time. But let's take any university and do basic maths. How many students do you have at this particular time? What is your faculty who have a PhD who can supervise? I bet you, Debarl, there is no single university that will meet the threshold. None. So when we get surprised that people are supervising more than 3, we must be asking ourselves, so where do we expect a miracle? So you have university vice chancellors who you are giving less and less money every year. You have a market that isn't appreciating the value of research. Then when they don't pay statutory deductions, when they don't pay taxes, you feign ignorance and surprise. The reality is they can't pay. They simply don't have the money to pay it. And they're trying to juggle heads. So I think what we must do, Debarl, is we must be able to go back to the basics and ask ourselves, first, I think public funding for universities in the long term is unsustainable. Pure and simple.
Public funding for universities.
I think
statutory deductions must be paid, especially when you are indicating on people's payslip that you have deducted the money.
Well,
even for they must be paid.
We'll come to that. Just a moment.
There's something that we're missing here.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
That's an argument that's easy to make. I say so because mine hasn't been paid, and I know that for a fact.
Yeah,
and it's easy to say it must be paid, but look at the reality. The reality is if you are getting capitation of 100% last year, and this year you have a capitation of 50%, until you reduce your overheads by 50%, the reality is something will fail. So it is okay to blame the university vice chancellor for not paying, but we must go to the root of the problem.
The root of the problem.
Well, and the root of the we have actually pointed to the root of the problem.
Yes.
Let me finish on this because I think
don't lose your train of thought. Let me just be fair also to Rachel as well as we just go. We give her the rounds as well. Rachel, on the research fund itself, I will have you also to comment on it because I think that is a ticklish issue that is big. I've lost my train of thought, but just comment on it. I'll get it. Then I'll ask you the question.
No, I didn't want us also to lose that point about research and about training business courses instead of technical courses that your university stands for. I want to believe that it's not market driven. It's simply that you are trying to raise money for that university.
For that university.
Yes. So the easiest way is to register as many as they come. Try to put them in the pipeline as best as you can so that you can raise the money for that university. Now, and then that brings me to the point of research and the funding that goes into a university, private or even, private or public. We are not thinking out of the box. For example, the universities in the US, they have a lot of endowment plans for the universities, whereby they even actually create an endowment that sustains the university management, the running of the university, and also create grants for the students. Here, we just wait for manna from heaven. We wait to see how this capitation that he's talking about. We have got government university students in private universities, and the amount that is being given is like, it's actually, I will put it very confident that private universities are subsidizing government. Because by the time you have so many students in a private university, and you are look at the facilities that go into training a student. There are lecturers to be paid. There are the facilities, the lecture halls, everything that goes into training a student. When you look at the money that the government is giving to private universities, you can see clearly that we need to sharpen our policy going forward. It can't be the way it is. That is the bit that I wanted to talk about. Now, the issue of endowment plan, if the government is not being able to have enough budget for the public universities, then we need to start being innovative as to how we can manage these universities. There is no point of having so many universities and creating a crisis in a country where you can actually do better planning, we get back to the specialities of those universities so that you can encourage that kind of pipeline in those universities and cut this business of having business students running the rest of the courses in the universities.
Right, and I know, David, we'll come to you. I know you're sitting on burning calls here. But I know Professor Dominic has to leave, and I just wanted maybe you to bring to bear, because you've worked in the United States and you've seen the way also the funding is being, expedited there. You can actually just give us a snippet of what really happens there and how we can extrapolate what they have here in the country.
When I look at our public universities here, and having run a private university, where everything from the toilet paper to your DVCs and everybody else, you have to earn that money. Your job is not to budget. I think that's what my brother was alluding to. With our public universities, with the dependency syndrome, where they say, well, we'll get allocation from government, we'll get money from government, they stop being creative in finding ways to fund education, to fund the programs at the universities. The endowment funds, what does it take to create an endowment fund? If you look at the research that's being done at the university, what does it take to attract research grants? But if that push is not there, and if that pressure is not there, and the ecosystem is not supporting such, then we are not going to have university leadership trying to find creative ways of bringing money to the college. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who is a Kenyan went to the University of Notre Dame about 15 years ago, nanotechnology, fluid dynamics, and they had a program there that was trying to miniaturize a lab from the whole of this room into a briefcase. They were funded by one of the national security agencies in the US, $5 million, that's 500 million shillings, to miniaturize a lab. It took them 4 years, and that lab now is in a briefcase, where now if there's an attack in any water system in the whole country, it can be tested within a very short period of time. Those are the kind of expertise and areas we're looking at. JQuat should be headed in that direction, where they attract grants, they attract enough money for different areas of science and technology that is able to fund other things that are happening within the university. But if we depend only on government allocations and we are not looking for creative ways of bringing funding, when we behave more like the private universities that have to find money to pay for everything, we've got a problem. The other issue that we have in the US, which makes it much easier, is the federal student aid program. We call it HELP here, where students are able to access student loans. That those student loans are able to pay the tuition, and that tuition enables the universities to run. Now, if you look at the capitation that we have for our students here, it's so little that it is not enough to help this brother and my sister over there run your universities. And I kind of sometimes feel sorry for our private universities here because of that pressure. But at the same time, I don't feel sorry for our public universities because they have become lazy. We wait every month, every year, for the 97,000 graduates that come out of high school. We don't have creative ways of getting those non-traditional students and bringing them back into the fold for them to get their degrees or advanced degrees and other creative ways of bringing money. So we need creativity in our leadership of our universities in ways of raising funds. But we also need a funding mechanism that will enable the universities also to sustain themselves to a certain extent. And then the other creative ways will bring in the extra funds to do the research and to fund other things.
Thank you. Professor, do I release you right now? Because I know you got a meeting,
I think
right?
don't release him for 30 seconds.
Don't release him for 30 seconds. He's got a good meeting.
But you can release him if you can. But
that's fine. Let's go ahead.
I think we are moving the nation to a solution and it's something I've been thinking about, and I would like to call it the convergence model. And in the convergence model, if you come back to, for example, the government funding, the reason why the government has been funding public universities is so that the public universities would actually produce a workforce to help the government run efficiently and effectively. That is the reason. Don't forget that. They have an interest at stake. They want to do that. And I think what this convergence model ought to do for us, just like the government had it in the past with public universities, I totally agree there are issues that need to be addressed to make it sustainable. We need to have a universal convergence model where we are actually matching different stakeholders in industry, for example. At our university, we were the first to come up with mobile phone learning. And we had asked ourselves, how do you train, a pastor located in northeastern Kenya who will never be able to see the walls of a university? And we thought, no, in the past, people have basically gone to where the universities are. But now, why can't we think of where to take the university where the people are?
Where the people are.
And the way this convergence worked was this. You look at the interests of the industry and the needs of the industry that we have in various sectors of our society and match them to different universities. That way, we will actually have a funding model that can sustain university education.
Right. Prof, he's putting him in a very ticklish situation. Do we go on, or you need to
No,
go?
another 10 minutes, I think.
Another 10 will be fine. Fantastic.
We need a solution, not just raise the issues. We need a solution for the nation, not just raise the problem.
Absolutely. Let's say format it. But lastly, I don't want to also dwell so much on the funding, because we have to discuss the curriculum. We have to discuss also the leadership. Do we need a chancellor or a professor to be a vice chancellor for that matter? Or we just need an administrator who is consummate in his profession? You're talking about mastery of experience, a person who can actually lead the organization. That is also what we need to delve deeper. But exhaustively using the resources that you have currently. We know maybe University of Nairobi, let's take for instance Kabete. You have 5,000 acres of land. What are we doing this land in trying to also give back to the community? Right? Why can't we come up with maybe a dairy production from that particular parcel of land where we have maybe 1,000 liters or maybe 10,000 of liters, being produced every day? You're looking for funds, you have resources. Huge tract of lands at Kenyatta universities are not being utilized. Yet you're waiting with a pail of hand every year from the government for you to actually, so we cannot be belly aching over the years about research fund, and you're not using your resources exhaustively in the first place.
And those are the creative ways.
Those are the creative ways you're talking about.
To look for funding.
Let's hear from Martin.
You hit it. We don't even need to be labor. What are we doing with the resources we have in our hands? When Moses was being sent by God, he was asked, what do you have? He said, I only have a rod, and that's what was used to sort out the sea and so on. But that said, funding issue is critical, and I like what my good friend Colin said, that he knows that even his statutory deductions have not been paid, which will make it impossible for him to get KRA clearance in the event that he wants any job in the public sector, because he's not compliant, and he knows, and he's sitting in the university. University capitation has been going down, year in, year out. The CBA negotiations have not been going up. They are stuck. They are somewhere there. If you are running a business, you know that this year you are having less money than you had last year, and you know that next year you'll have less money than you had this year. What do? You continue sitting there and waiting with a ball, or you take practical, pragmatic decisions to reduce your costs to tie it into your income. The problem with public universities is that they sit there and expect that the treasury will increase capitation, and treasury is not increasing capitation. So look back to your costs, look at your overheads, and do something about it. Then be in compliance, because again, part of management and leadership is for you to have to be compliant. You have to have integrity of your systems. You can't deduct people money and you don't remit them, because that is, as you know, is a crime. It's criminal. So really, we have to find that place where we make universities accountable, and to be accountable means cut your cloth according to your size.
Okay, but can we also maybe look at where this particular issue is emanating from? Because we had a robust Module 2 that I think was adversely affected with the pronouncement from the Ministry of Education that we don't need to actually continue with the Module 2. And this was the biggest revenue generation, especially for public universities, that threw the universities out of kilter completely.
That's part of the problem.
That is just one of the
Module 2 monies were never being put onto the accounting system. So Treasury, even up to now, is struggling with universities to ask them, so you collect the money from...
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. There was a poor planning on it. Yeah. Which has actually brought all these issues that we're talking about at the meeting.
I don't think the ministry stopped Module 2. I think what stopped Module 2 is the market. The reality is Module 2 still exists.
There were no students.
But there are no Module 2 students. And there are no Module 2 students, or there are few Module 2 students, because this thing called overproduction and a lazy approach to solving problems. We have expanded university education so much that what we are producing is more than what we need. When I went to law school, Debarl, there were 2 law schools. Nairobi University and Moi University. Now there are over 10. The numbers have increased by over 10. So what does that mean? It means that even our expenditure for producing law graduates have increased by over 10. So every year, there is a university in every village. We even have a University Act that says there must be a university in every county. So it is fairly possible for you to go to Asumbi Primary School, Asumbi High School, and Asumbi University and teach in Asumbi. So you become
an Asumbi product,
and that's your worldview. And this is happening. So we extend it to an extent where the resources that are then available cannot meet the needs that we have. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2, I think that is critical, is university leadership must be rethought. Because I think we must be able to ask ourselves between academic leadership and administrative leadership. We have fused both, with the consequence that academic leaders are doing administrative work, but without financial experience. So you get a professor whose core business was in a lab, whose core business was in a mortuary, whose core business was in a place for design. Now you tell him that come and manage this place, and you must know about business process outsourcing. You must know about KPIs. And he's learning as he does. So he will be telling you about KPIs without knowing what they are. He'll call you to a meeting to discuss KPIs because he thinks the meeting is a KPI. So you can't then have, so when you say, let's use the land that is available. This guy's worldview is that revenue is through students. So what do you mean by use the land that is available? That doesn't, so when you talk about use, he thinks that the next thing is to build some building. That's why there was a craze over the last 10 years of building things. You're starting a TV station, you are starting a mortuary, you are starting a hospital, you are starting a mall, all manner of things. Yet, innovative issues that can help you raise resources are all over the place. Issue number 1, Debarl, there's no university that has sufficient accommodation for its students. None.
And it doesn't have to.
But there are several universities that have sufficient land. So if you constructed accommodation, you would raise much more money than a mall.
Right.
Or a mortuary. But we aren't thinking about it.
We have also I know from the private universities where there's the PPP, there's a private PPP
partnerships.
Yes, where they have, and we know institutions like Kwetu, they are coming up with all these accommodations. So we have universities who are leasing their lands for them to develop these structures to accommodate the students. Yet you have tract of land that we're talking about which cannot think in that particular manner. So from that particular point is a poor planning. But I want just to wonder on the research a bit, because I think there was a pronouncement from the government that there will be a research fund.
It is there. There is some form of it.
It's some form, but
it's actually created by law.
By law.
There's under the Universities Act. There's
a research fund,
and there's even a national research fund. But
I'm talking about the National Research Fund.
Yes, but we should ask ourselves, what research has the National Research Fund funded over the last years? How much money? And what are the research products? That's the basic question you should ask the people who are running that research fund.
All right. Let's wind up on that.
Oh, okay.
You wanted to comment on the research fund?
No, I was wondering, recently we had the government pronounce itself that we will change the way we fund. Debarl, where we have reached, we are 56 years old, and we should be creating wealth for this nation. creating wealth, not creating money for consumption, creating wealth for the future generations. But, you know, we want to start looking at research, but also we want to look at aligning our programs to the needs of this nation, the needs of the industry. That is what we are not actually doing exactly. So funding should be based on the courses that they bring a skill set on the table that is consumed immediately by the country. But if we are going to talk about research in a casual way, the way we do, then we are not going to be able to do it. Now, the universities are supposed to be the leaders of policy making in terms of guiding the policy. If you are able to carry rigorous research, then you are able to come up with policy briefs that can support the government in making the correct decisions in whichever sector we are talking about. However, when you look at what we are doing, everything for us is that industry is a standalone, the other one is standalone. Nobody is integrating. We don't have an holistic approach to how we want to do our business. And that is how I see it.
All right, thank you. Let's just tackle the issue of PhDs, because I think that's a very sensitive issue as well. Because also we had the Commission for University Education saying that for you to teach at what level you need a PhD.
Yeah.
And then it brought a lot of controversy that by 2018, actually, they're given that most of the lecturers should have a PhD. They should have a PhD. Yeah. Is this really prompting what we're seeing also with the JKUAT, with the 118 PhDs that have been, they have been put forth? If there was pressure for CUE, and I think at some point that debate went tapered down because there was a lot of bugbears and fears from the lecturers. But can we talk about that in light of the leadership that also must you be a professor for you to, I think that one has been addressed. But let's talk about the PhDs.
I think for the PhDs, there's sense to it, but there is also reality. Because the problem is that we have not matched expansion with the development of capacity. So it's okay to say, let's have PhDs teaching, because actually it's important. It's important that somebody who has the necessary discipline, the necessary academic experience to actually help us create knowledge and, in the academic space. But it's one thing to make a pronouncement, and it's totally another thing to match that pronouncement to the reality on the ground. So what we have is a situation where for sure we know, just like we did several years ago, we said water to all by 2000. When 2000 arrived, we stopped talking about water to all. So it's a good thing, but it's a pronouncement. Can it be matched with the resource and the capacity building? Absolutely not.
All right. Maybe I can comment on that before I leave. Yes. The last time I looked, we had slightly less than 10,000 people in this country with PhDs. The current demand is about 30,000. And out of the slightly less than 10,000, almost 2,000 of them, like us, they're in the private sector. So we are leaving about 8,000 PhD holders in this country to do all the 67 universities that are in this country. So that pronouncement in and of itself was not actually possible to do. So what we should be looking at is how do we encourage those students who are in our PhD programs to finish on time, to be able to do research that's beneficial to this country. At the same time, as they're creating knowledge, we're also creating workforce. We have to look at both. We create knowledge and we create workforce at the same time. Now, I chair the Doctoral Association of Eastern Africa, and you should be a member. And professor there. I chair the Doctoral Association of Eastern Africa, where we bring in our professors, PhD holders in this country. We bring in our PhD students. We just opened a chapter in Rwanda. And what we do, we mentor our PhD students to go through the program we have from University of Nairobi. All the universities are represented in our body. And what we do, we work with these students to make sure they are outside of the universities, because supervision is a problem in this. When you have, I think, over 40,000, I think, I'm trying to remember the number of PhD candidates we have in this country, and they're in the thousands. Then you have 8,000 people with PhDs who are teaching, doing research, and also supervising. It's actually not possible. So what the association does, we hold colloquium throughout the year. We bring PhD students, they do their presentations, we critique their dissertations, our professors are coming from University of Nairobi, JKUAT, all over the universities. And so we have to look at this from a very comprehensive point of view. That's why I insist on an ecosystem. If we don't look at anything from an ecosystem, we miss things that are important.
Thank you.
And they might look small, but they are important.
Thank you.
So it used to take 10 years to finish a PhD in this country at some point. Now it should be taking about 4 years, 5 years to finish. That's the only way you're going to accelerate the graduation of our students.
David Gorea. We're remaining with around 4 minutes, so let's just also be cognizant of the time as well. We'll come to you, Rachel.
I know that we have a dilemma with PhDs, but it's absolutely important that we insist on offering quality university education. And so we do need the PhDs. What we ought to ask ourselves is, what good can we do with the ones that we have? Perhaps we need to cut down on some programs so that we may deliver equality. And often in the private universities, you find that the student lecturer ratio is actually a very good one, 1 to 10, 1 to 20, which is different from the public universities where you have, lots of people going in. And maybe we can explore some of the ways in which we may be able to share innovatively the PhDs we have in the country. I'm sure we can come up with an education model that allows cross-breeding and says this is where we need to go, this is what we have, and here is how we can share in order to get there. But we must insist that if you're going to have quality graduates, people who are going to treat our mothers and fathers, and we know that our mothers and fathers are in the good hands of doctors, pilots who are going to fly us, safely, accountants who know integrity is key, then we must insist on having PhDs in our universities. But we must also,
PhDs, but the quality of PhDs is questionable as well. Maybe we can have Dr. Collins or Dr. commenting on it, and Rachel.
Debarl, we are very used in this country to making pronouncements that we have no idea how they will be implemented. And I think before I come to quality of PhDs, just last year, government made a statement about 100% transition to high schools. I know of a secondary school that I'm on the board on that last year had 150 students. As a consequence, this year they have 450 students in Form 1. That's a 3% increase. Where are the resources? Where are the people training them? It is simply doesn't make sense. The same thing happened with the PhDs. We said by this time, everybody who teaches must have PhDs. So what does that mean? There's now demand. So you now go into mass production of PhDs. So there is a drive towards production without worrying about quality. The moment you are supposed to supervise 3 people and you end up supervising 10, and you're also doing research, you're also doing community service, you're also doing webometrics, something will give. You just heard yesterday what the doctor was telling you about the student who misspelled 6 to 6 and it was passed. That's what happens when there's a challenge about, and I think what we must do, Debarl, is we must start being honest in our policy pronouncements. We must start cutting our cloth according to our size.
According to our size.
That means saying this is the reality, how do we deliver on this reality?
And because how do you supervise? Of course, things like sex for 6 will pass because of lack of proper and good supervision. And that's also questioning the quality of the PhDs that also we are putting in the market. Yeah, let's hear from Rachel briefly.
No, well, I think I just want to underscore, my colleagues have already covered the quality. We need to emphasize on quality, not only just quality, emphasize on quality research, quality teaching, quality curriculum development, design and development. We need to start somewhere, because by the time a student is misspelling and it's passing, where is the problem? Is it where they came from, or is it at this university level? There is a problem. So quality is something we need to emphasize and make sure that it's on the table. All processes of teaching until you supervise this student and have him pronounced as the thesis. When you look at a thesis, you would know when a thesis is ready. You know, anybody who has actually supervised and is serious about what they are doing, you would know. You would look at the methodology and see, yes, this methodology follows a certain, criteria. But, the way we just pass them, something is wrong. Now, we also need to look at the regionalization, regional standardization, so that we are able to make, for ease of student movement and also the lecturers. It's impossible that we could be getting. Why are we spending so much money in integrating this country? Regional integration is very deep in this country. Yet you see that most of the things it's the passport we have seen. That is the best we have seen in terms of regional integration. That you can go to Tanzania and Uganda and the 5 countries or 6. We need to look at that standardization so that the ease of East Africa doing business together, we might also borrow leave from Uganda, Tanzania, and these other countries.
Thank you, thank you. Let's leave it at that, because I know there's a lot we haven't covered. The curriculum we haven't talked about, which is a big issue as well. We are actually designing or coming up with the CBC right now, but the universities will be the bottleneck because you still have the old system. So what is the interface? If we are to overhaul, it should have been the entire ecosystem. But we have all this, talent-based, but the universities still, they're archaic and they have not overhauled also their curriculum as well. We leave it at that. From Kenya School of Law, so many of the law students are being failed right now. Is it the quality of the products that we have from the universities as well, or what is happening? Briefly, as we are winding up, I'll be remiss if I don't ask you that question.
Well,
very briefly.
This is a conversation that is now in public, and I think we need to face it. It's a mix of many things. It's about the quality of the people who are coming in. Colin said we now have over 10 schools producing lawyers. The quality there must also be questioned. But we also are having a challenge in terms of all these people being produced from all these universities are being pipelined into Kenya School of Law. So the numbers are huge. You look at 2,000 or so. How do you teach 2,000? And then there is the whole thing about the teaching, the setting of the exam, and the marking of it, and the quality of it. So this is a big conversation that we must have, and I believe that there is space for that.
And I think we need to create another space for that as well. I need to release you also to have breakfast and release Dominic Mwenja also for the board meeting. Thank you very much for this cogent and very insightful discussion we've had. So I think we'll have this particular discussion now on the merger, which we've not really talked about, the curricula as well. And I'll also communicate the date, maybe just to have the same panel on there as well. But for our viewers, I want to thank you also the comments that are coming through as I'm winding up. We have Kaikai Kulabusia saying from 2000 to 2013, the public universities were depending on Module 2 programs for internal funding. Now the beneficiaries are private universities. Generally speaking, the public universities are shrinking and dwindling. Sooner than later, they are going to collapse. Also, we have the Kush. He's saying, can we adopt what the Philippines has? One university and a system with constituent colleges of excellences, right? This is happening maybe with other countries where we have the University of New York in Boston University. Can we adopt something like that? Edward is saying, I agree with you, Martin, on the same breath as a young scientist researcher, the gross embezzlement of research grants by our elderly is killing our opportunities. And lastly, Jacob, this forum has come at a time high institutions are being haunted by 3 in 1 malady or something. He's trying to put for their leadership, financial fights, raw human resource. Is it baking? So it needs radical therapy or our future will be cancerous or something like that. This is what is being put up by Jacob as well. But if you've not also gotten the news of the day, when we're talking about leadership in university, this is currently what is happening at the University of Nairobi on page 5 of the Daily Nation, where the Vice Chancellor, of course, it says Mbithi's bid for the second term flops. University of Nairobi Vice Chancellor Professor Peter Mbithi's bid for a second term has flopped after the council turned down his request. Is it also because of issue of leadership that now maybe he's not having his second term as well? That is another matter for discussion another time. Thank you very much for your valued company. You've been watching Leadership Forum here on AM Live. And thank you also for driving the show with me.